Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Valeria Fajardo. I work on the data team at the Children's Bureau, and I'm a statistician, looks at the foster care and adoption data from AFCARS. And I'd just like to share with you some of the data at a national level, just give you some high-level numbers today to give you a sense of what's going on out there. As most of you know, AFCARS data, that stands for the Adoption and Foster Care Analysis and Reporting System. They're reported from all 52 states and jurisdictions, including DC and Puerto Rico, and submitted twice a year. And it includes there's a foster care file, which includes the data on all children for whom the agencies have care and placement responsibility. And an adoption file, which includes all children who have had a finalized adoption with involvement by the Child Welfare Agency. And each of those files are submitted on a 6-month basis. Yes. Oh, in your blue packet, you can follow along in the handout. And I think that might be a good idea to have it in front of you because some of the numbers on these slides may be hard to see from where you're sitting, so it might help a little bit. So, states work hard to provide accurate data, and so they frequently go back and correct and resubmit their data whenever any issues come to light. So for that reason, the data are dynamic, and the data presented here in this presentation may not match previously published data for the same time period. So that's just something to keep in mind. So all of the data presented here today are current as of September of this year. And if you'd like to use or disseminate any of the information in this presentation, we just ask that you would please contact us first and just check in with us first to verify that the data are still correct and current. And my contact information will be provided at the end of the presentation. So this is our trends chart. It summarizes all of the subpopulations that we create out of the AFCARS data and shows trends over time. This chart's currently available on the Children's Bureau's website under the Adoption and Foster Care Statistics section. So you can feel free to look at that later, and there's some discussion of the data available there as well. And using the 6-month AFCARS submissions, we create annual files. And our standard annual file represents the federal fiscal year, which runs from October 1st through September 30th. So all of whenever I refer to a year in this presentation, I'm always referring to the federal fiscal year. So this chart shows you the first group is the point-in-time counts of children who were in foster care on the last day of the federal fiscal year, September 30th, and it gives you a snapshot in time. There may be times in the year where there are more or fewer children in care, but this is just our chosen point in time. We also have our numbers of children who entered foster care during the year, counted only once, even if the child re-entered during the same year. And the numbers of children who exited foster care, again, counted only once. We also have the children waiting to be adopted, and that's of children who were in care on the last day of the federal fiscal year. There's no federal definition for children waiting to be adopted, but for our analyses, we calculated as children waiting to be adopted include children with a goal of adoption and or whose parental rights have been terminated. It excludes children whose parental rights have been terminated who are 16 or older and have a goal of emancipation. So that's something just to keep in mind is that working definition whenever we discuss the children waiting to be adopted population. We also have the numbers of children with the TPR. So these are the parental rights have been terminated and they're waiting for adoption. We also have our counts of children who have been adopted with Public Child Welfare Agency involvement during the federal fiscal year, and that comes from the adoption file. And then finally, our numbers of children served refers to all children who were in the public foster care system during the year at some point. So it's the sum of all children in care on the first day plus anyone who enters during the year. So that's just a sort of an overview. We're going to look more specifically. These are the numbers of children entering and exiting foster care between 2002 and 2009. And all of my slides will be a range of years from 2002 and 2009, just to kind of give you, this is the most recent available data, and we go back as far as 2002 because we have pretty good confidence in the quality of the data going back that far. So a really interesting thing we're seeing is the numbers of entries into foster care each year always outnumbered the exits from care until the last few years. The entries began declining in 2006 after an all-time high in 2005, and now the exits from foster care outnumber the entries, beginning with 2007's data. The numbers of children in foster care, reported to be in foster care on September 30th of each year from 2002 to 2009, shows a decline from 523,000 children in 2002 to 424,000 children in 2009, which is almost by 100,000 cases. And our total numbers of children served have also declined by 100,000 cases. So it's quite a remarkable decrease in the foster care population. So we wanted to look and see whether this was just being driven by a few large states or whether states all across the country were reducing their foster care populations. And we saw that between 2002 and 2009, 27 states' data showed a decline in the numbers of children in care by a percent change of at least negative 10%. And of those 27, 21 of them declined by at least negative 20%. And of those, 5 of them had a percent change of negative 40% or more. So some of the states were showing remarkable declines in their foster care population. And just between 2008 and 2009, in that one-year interval, we saw 43 states who showed a decline in their numbers of children in care, 18 of which had a percent change of negative 10% or more. So because these changes were so remarkable, we followed up through the ACF regional offices with those states that reported a substantial decrease at those various intervals. First between 2002 and 2006, again 2007 to 2008, and then again between 2008 and 2009. And 30 states provided us with some informal comments to verify their data and give some explanation. So we compiled the top reasons that were identified from the state comments. And I'd just like to emphasize that this information was provided by states and is anecdotal in nature. It's not the findings of a rigorous evaluation of any type. But we did think this was worth sharing because we did see these themes emerging over and over again. So they reported changes in assessment and screening processes, and these are all reasons for contributing to the decline of the children in foster care. Including revised safety or risk assessment tools or processes. Alternative and differential response was cited as a frequent reason for changing the way children are screened in when they first come in. Seeking alternative placements to foster care and identifying placement resources using relative connection search programs and an emphasis on identifying placement resources prior to custody referrals. Increasing the availability of home-based programs and services with a focus on preventing children from entering care through family preservation and support services. And they also use intensive in-home therapeutic services and an increased service array. They also reported focusing on engaging families and using a strengths-based approach when working with children and families. Engaging with families, using family group decision-making and team decision meetings and family team meetings and other similar models. And finally, strengthening their partnerships with the courts through increased collaboration between courts and the child welfare agencies. They talked about family courts moving children to permanency faster and the use of drug courts as well. So now I'm going to return back to our foster care data, and the first thing I want to take a look at are the entries into foster care. And we're going to look specifically at the reasons that were identified for removal from home and their placement into foster care. And we'll also take a look at the distributions by race and ethnicity for the entries. So the first slide shows us the distribution of children and youth entering care each year by age. There's several features to take notice of when you look at these slides. I know these clustered bar charts can be a lot to look at, but first look at the overall shape of the line. It shows two peaks. There's the largest group, which is infants, and then we have a smaller peak during the teenage years, around 15 and 16 years old. Secondly, you can see the trends over time within each age group, showing 2002 to 2009 within each age category. And so you can see that we've seen an increase in the percentage of children coming in at very young ages, and another increase in the percentage of children coming in at 16 and 17 years old. And some of the ages in the middle have sort of flattened out or are decreasing in terms of percentages. And so when we look at these entries into foster care by the reasons for removal, you can see that over half of the children coming into care had neglect as a reason for removal. We saw an increase in parental drug abuse as a reason between 2002 and 2006, but it seems to have leveled off since then. And now remember, this is a multiple response category, so children may be in more than one category. They'll be represented in every category to which applies to them. But we do have some concerns about the quality of the data on this particular AFCARS data element. So there is some underreporting of reasons that we know about. So that's just one caveat when you're looking at the data. Now, when we look at the percentages of entries into foster care by race and ethnicity, you can see the three largest groups are African American, Hispanic, and white. And just to show how we code this, we've coded it so that all the race categories are non-Hispanic. So that's just to keep them mutually exclusive. And then two or more races is shown on the far right. So the percentages of non-Hispanic, white, and African American children entering foster care have declined over time, while the percentage of Hispanic children has increased. But I thought it was important to show the rate of entries per 1,000 children in the general population identified with that same race and ethnicity characteristics. It's a slightly different picture. And I just did the three largest groups here because just to keep from looking too cluttered. But 7.6 African American children entered foster care out of every 1,000 African American children in the U.S. in 2002, which declined to 6.2 out of every 1,000 by 2009. So that rate has decreased some. While we saw the percentages of Hispanic or Latino children entering foster care increasing, we can see that the rate is actually relatively flat and even decreases slightly, from 3.7 in 2006 to 3.0 in 2009. That's the line in the middle there. And this is because the percentage of Hispanic and Latino children in the general population has also been increasing. And the rate of white children entering foster care was 3.1 per 1,000 in the general population in 2002 and is now at 2.7 in 2009. So that's also decreased slightly. So the next section I'm going to talk about changes over time in the population of children and youth waiting to be adopted and the ages of children and youth in foster care on the last day of the year. So there has been a slight increase in the proportion of children and youth waiting to be adopted of all of the children in foster care on September 30th, from 25.6% in 2002 up to 27.1% in 2009. And the reason I wanted to highlight this is because it's not easy to notice that because the numbers of children waiting to be adopted have gone down because the numbers of children in foster care have gone down. But when you look at those children waiting to be adopted, that's actually increased as a percentage. And the percentage of children who are waiting to be adopted who are identified as African American has declined considerably from 41% in 2002 to 30% in 2009. So that was a notable difference there. And here you can see the decline in the percentage of African American children waiting to be adopted, that first big group there. There's also an increase in the percentage of Hispanic children waiting to be adopted, and the percentage who are white has pretty much leveled off in recent years. We also see an increase in the two or more category. So here is the percent of children in foster care on the last day of the year by age. If you recall, when we looked at the age distribution for the entries, it looked quite different. The largest group was infants, and we had a small peak at the 15 and 16-year-olds. Now, the age distribution for children in foster care on the last day of the year, it also has two peaks, but the largest group is the older youth at 16 and 17 years old. The second largest group are the 1-year-olds. If you look at the trends over time, there's a very large increase in the percentages of the very young. Infants increased from 2002 to 2007, but has actually leveled off. and the 1 through 4-year-olds all see an increase in terms of percentages entering care, or in care, excuse me. And there was a decrease in the percentage of kids ages 9 to 15, and a sharp increase in the percentage of kids in foster care at 17 years of age. So these are trends to keep in mind. It seems as though the two ends of the spectrum in terms of age are the ones, those peaks seem to be becoming more pronounced over time, and we're seeing the ages in the middle becoming less and less frequent. So looking at our population of children and youth in foster care on the last day of the year, we wanted to know how many of them had a case plan goal of long-term foster care and whether that has changed over time. About 10% of them had a case plan goal of long-term foster care in 2002, and this has only declined slightly to 8% in 2009. And then for 16 and 17-year-olds specifically, the percentage with a case plan goal of long-term foster care has stayed pretty constant, fluctuating between 18 and 19%. Looking at these same older youth, we can see about 20% of them have a goal of emancipation each year. So here I'd like to mention a little note about the way AFCARS is reported. Whenever states use APLA or another planned permanent living arrangement as a goal, that's not one of the AFCARS options for reporting. So depending on whether the youth has a permanent connection with a family or is in a foster care placement, that may determine whether the goal is mapped to long-term foster care or to emancipation. So in other words, if the state has worked towards and there's a permanent connection between the child and the foster parent with whom they're living, and the foster parent has made a commitment to this youth, and the state is told to map their goal reflecting this to the AFCARS value of emancipation. And so if the child will be in foster care and there's no permanent connection, then the state maps it to long-term foster care. So if you think of those two things together, you can see it makes up a pretty large proportion of the older youth. I also looked at the distribution of the case plan goals for the entries into foster care, but too few had yet established their case plan goals at that time of entry to have really reliable information. So that's why we're looking at it for those kids who are in care on the last day. Okay, this next segment of the presentation, we will look at the exits from foster care and the changes over time at the age at exit, the discharge reasons, the numbers of adoptions, the numbers of emancipations, and how long the foster care children were in care before they exited, depending on their exit reasons. So this is the distribution of the exits from foster care each year by age. And one of the striking features of this chart is that the percentages of exits at the age of 17 and 18 have fluctuated dramatically from year to year. When we looked at the exits to emancipation specifically, the age at exit to emancipation varied both across states and within states, so we're going to need to explore that further, and we'll welcome input from and feedback from folks about why that might be happening. Looking at all of the exits from foster care for all ages, we can see that over half of the children discharged to reunification with their parents or primary caretaker, but this percentage has declined slightly since 2002. Living with a relative has also declined as a reason for discharge. We see an increase in the percentage of discharges from foster care to adoption in the last couple of years. There's also an increase in the exits to guardianship, as perhaps more states might be using this option. And there is also an increase in the percentage discharging to emancipation, up from 7.2% of all exits in 2002 to 10.7% in 2009. And we're going to take another look at the emancipations in just a minute. But first I'd like to focus on these adoptions. This increase in the percentage of adoptions translate into these numbers. We saw an increase in the percentage. The percentage increase was from 17.3% in 06 to 20.3% in 09. And here we can see that there were about 51,000 finalized adoptions reported in 02, which was pretty steady until 2006. And then we went from 2007 to 2009, the numbers climbed all the way up to 57,000. Well, the other population that was increasing was the percentage of exits to the emancipations. So taking a look at those actual numbers, the total numbers of youth discharged to emancipation rose from 19,367 in 2002 to 29,471 in 2009. So finally, we wanted to take a look at how long children and youth are staying in foster care before they leave to all these various outcomes. Reunifications took about 6.5 months in 2002 and 8 months in 2009. Living with a relative also took about 8 months. Adoptions are taking less time than they used to. The median length of stay has gone down from about 3 years in 2002 to about 30 months in the last few years. And I do want to emphasize that it's important to remember to consider not only how these lengths of stay compare to their prior years, but also just think about what it is now. The median length of stay for adoptions is 30 months in 2009, and it's actually much longer for older youth. For 17 and 18-year-olds who were adopted, their median length of stay was about 5 years in 2002, which has declined to a little over 4 years in 2009. Youth who emancipate from foster care also spend less time in care than they used to. In 2002, the median length of stay for emancipation was 48 months, which is 4 years, and is down to about 40 months in 2009, which is a little over 3 years. So this may be partially due to an increasing proportion of children entering at older ages, but that's just something to look at. We're seeing improvement on the national standard individual measures for the CFSR, looking at the percentages of youth who emancipate in 3 years or less and things like that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of material today, and it was a very high level, just trying to convey a picture of what our foster care population looks like at the national level and how it's changed over the years. One of the key points to take away from this presentation is that the foster care population is decreasing all across the country, and we're exploring ways that it may be changing. We encourage you all to take a close look at your own state's data and see how it may compare to this national picture and what may be impacting the data that we can't see just by looking at AFCARS. So I welcome your questions, comments, and feedback, and I provided my contact information here so you can feel free to contact me later and follow up with any further information. I would welcome all that. So thank you all very much. Are there any questions right now?
Valeria, could you go back to the third slide, the trends chart? Could you just really just say the numbers in each of the categories for folks?
Sure, I'd be happy. She asked that I would go over the numbers from the trends chart. There's a lot of information here. These are the numbers for all of these various subpopulations. So just to reiterate, the numbers of children in care on the last day of the year went from 523,000 in 2002 down to 424,000 in 2009. The entries have gone from 295,000 in 2002 to 255,000 in 2009. And you can see that, in those last few years, it drops off pretty remarkably. The exits from care have gone from 278,000 in 2002. They were going up until 2006 and 2007, and then dropped off down to 276,000 in 2009. The numbers of children waiting to be adopted, and remember this is sort of a subgroup of the children in care on the last day, has gone from 134,000 in 2002 to 115,000 in 2009. The numbers of children who had their parental rights terminated for both parents has gone from 75,000 in 2002 to 70,000 in 2009. And again, that's a subgroup of the children who are waiting to be adopted and who are in care on the last day. The numbers of children who were adopted from the adoption file has gone from 51,000 in 2002 up to 57,000 in 2009. And finally, our total numbers of children served by the child welfare agencies who are in foster care at any point during the year went from 800,000 in 2002 down to 700,000 in 2009. So our trends data really show some real changes going on out there at the national level. Again, we're seeing changes happening all across the country. So there's really some changes going on in the child welfare field. Yes?
On the median length of stay in
Yes. Here we are on the median length of stay in foster care by discharge reason. The reunifications took about 6.5 months in 2002 and 8 months in 2009. And then living with a relative was also about 8 months. I know it's not easy to see exactly where those fall on the chart, but if anyone wants the exact numbers that are behind some of these charts, feel free to contact me, and I have all those tables available.
Have you been able to drill down on the data regarding the entries of the teenagers to 17 months?
Yes, the question was, have I been able to drill down specifically looking at those older teenagers entering foster care? Yes, actually, we just recently did a webinar last week for specifically focusing in on those older youth in foster care, and looking at the reasons for removal for 16, 17-year-olds, their lengths of stay, their race and ethnicity breakdown. So we do have all that information. You know, I was trying to keep this presentation pretty broad and try to cover everybody at the same time, but certainly there are a lot of interesting ways to look at the data, and there are big differences between things like reasons for removal and things like that when you're looking at the very young age group versus the older age group. And for anyone in the room who's going to be here for the foster care managers meeting tomorrow, I'm going to be looking more specifically at those age groups in that presentation. Yes.
Is there any national data on reentries? We're starting to see some of our kids come back in.
Yes, and the question was, what are the national trends regarding reentries into foster care? We have seen a decline in the percentage of reentries into foster care. I have the numbers actually over there at my desk. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but when we look at the individual measure that's part of the Permanency Composite 1 for the CFSR, which looks at timeliness and permanency of reunification, that there's a reentry measure there that looks at all the children who discharged to reunification in the prior 12-month period, what percent of them re-entered foster care, and I believe it was around 12% was the reentry rate. But I can follow up with that. I'll certainly be covering that in tomorrow's meeting as well. So if folks want to get the slides from that presentation or any specifics around the data, please feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to send it along. So, but yes, I mean, overall, we're seeing an improvement in reentry, and it's not, it's going in the right direction. It's going down. So. What's that? I have not done analysis regarding dissolutions and disruptions of adoption, so I don't have information on that this time. Sorry. So, any other questions or comments? Okay, if not, it looks like I'm finished a little early, so I'll turn it back over to Heidi. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Valeria. And Valeria's going to be hanging out for a little while, so if you want to run over and talk to her, it's a good time to grab her. So I hope you've enjoyed our morning session. I do want to say that when we come back, if we could come back maybe a little bit early, say at 10:10, for our family engagement plenary. This was originally a workshop. And again, in trying to pick these workshops, you know, we agonized over these workshops for months. We had many, many meetings and really tried to find workshops that had a balance that would be of interest to all of you in the audience representing the three different roles that you play. But we really felt that family engagement was a critical piece for all of us. That we all need to hear more about that. So we elevated the next workshop to a plenary, and we're just really looking forward to this presentation. So we will ask that you come back. And I neglected to go over the last session in the afternoon. We will present the latest in CFSR data. We know that you have an interest in that, and we wanted to give you the latest information while you're here, the cutting edge, as well as federal updates on important information that we think you need to know. So we're a little bit early for the break, and I don't know if they have I don't know if we have food yet, but please come back at 10 after 10 and give you some time to network, and thank you very much.